The best rental starting pitcher on the market, Jack Flaherty, is officially heading to the Los Angeles Dodgers in a huge deal that gives one of the favorites in the National League another boost to a rotation that could definitely use a little bit of help now that they've had a rash of injuries and looks to be potentially on the front of another World Series crown, their first since the pandemic-shortened 2020 season. After struggling with a midseason trade last year from the Cardinals to the Orioles, especially in the postseason, Jack Flaherty is going back to a contender after signing a one-year deal with the Detroit Tigers, as the Dodgers hope to unlock the most out of him and use him in a postseason run to secure a World Series ring. Flaherty is a very interesting piece, a former top 5 Rookie of the Year finisher and Cy Young finisher back in 2018 and 2019 respectively. He provides a lot of interesting experience to a very young Dodgers rotation at the moment and could be the missing piece that the Dodgers need to go back to the World Series. In this video, we'll dive into the Jack Flaherty trade that just happened a couple minutes ago, talk about the players that both the Dodgers and the Tigers are getting in this deal, and dive into exactly what each team gets in this deal, grade them from A to F, and see who wins and who loses. Before we begin, I'd mean a ton if you could subscribe to the channel. It's the easiest way to help me out. More trade deadline content every trade deadline, including during the offseason, and you'll also get awesome baseball video essays from me and other creators out there as well. Without further ado, let's dive into this Jack Flaherty trade that just happened a couple minutes ago. After having an okay season in St. Louis in 2023 and then really struggling in Baltimore after being acquired at the trade deadline, he has really had a resurgence in 2024. His age 28 season, Jack Flaherty has been a good 7-5 record with a 2.95 ERA. He's currently struck out 133 batters and only 106 2/3 innings pitched, which is definitely a very impressive feat. And in terms of his strikeout rate, it's currently a career high 32.1%. It was only 25.5% last year, and he's done that while also drastically lowering his walk rate. It's also a career low 4.6%. In 2023, it was 7.3. So he's done a great job of striking out a ton of batters and limiting walks substantially. He's done a great job of that so far, and he's a completely new pitcher in Detroit, which is why interest in him has been so high considering the fact that he struggled last year in Baltimore. His peripherals also show that he's doing very well as well. A 3.11 FIP suggests that he's actually doing about as average as he has been with his ERA. He's not getting lucky. He really is just that good. And his walks and hits per innings pitch is below 1 at 0.956. So that whip number is definitely a very promising sign that he's doing the right things in Detroit and can be counted on in the postseason because he's just having a dominant year. Although he has been somewhat overshadowed by Tariq Skubal, Flaherty has definitely been a very good pitcher this year and without a doubt is going to go into the postseason in a Dodgers rotation that currently is pretty ravaged with injuries. Walker Buehler, Dustin May, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Tony Gonsolin, Emmett Sheehan, all injured, and right now you're having players like Gavin Stone, who has been very good in his own right, but is still only in his rookie year, and Justin Robleski and River Ryan, who hadn't played at all in the major leagues before 2024, all going in your rotation right now. You need some depth, and although Clayton Kershaw is back and Tyler Glasnow has been good, he's pitched a lot of innings. Glasnow has not historically pitched a ton of innings. You need some pitching depth in order to make sure you have the depth and the arms to make it deep into October, and that's exactly what Jack Flaherty provides. The first player heading back to Detroit in this deal is someone who signed for only $3,000 out of the Dominican Republic in the 2021 international signing class, but is now considered a borderline top 100 prospect in Thayron Liranzo. And Liranzo is someone who is a very intriguing catcher first base prospect. He doesn't have the best catching defense in terms of his framing, but he has a cannon behind the dish, and that's part of the reason why scouts think he could potentially stick there long term. And he's done a decent job in the minor leagues hitting as well. He doesn't have a great hit tool, as most catchers don't, but he has some in-game pop, which is really something that excites a lot of prospect evaluators. So far in 2024, across 74 games, he only has 7 home runs in high A, but in 2023 in single A, he hit 24 across 94 games, and at only age 21, that's definitely not a bad thing. The jump from A to high A is difficult, granted not the most difficult in the minor leagues, but still a jump, especially for someone that young. He's playing against players who just got out of college, who are 22, 23 maybe, so there is a big gap of competition between someone who is only in his 4th year of affiliated ball and someone who just potentially even played in the College World Series. So there's a big gap in talent right there. And Liranzo is someone who is a very intriguing potential top 100 prospect who entered the year ranked number 8 on MLB Pipeline's ranking of the Dodger system. And currently on the updated Baseball America rankings, he is the number 3 prospect in the Dodgers organization. And although the top 100 hasn't been fully updated just yet, given the fact that Alex Freeland, who's ranked 4th on the Dodgers in the new update, is currently a top 100 prospect, we can assume that he will be on that list most likely when they update sooner rather than later. There are definitely some adjustments he needs to make in his swing. He tends to overswing a lot. He does swing and miss a little bit, especially within the zone, and that just exacerbates to be worse outside of the zone. So if he can go ahead and do that, he could be a potentially close to league average hitter. Granted, projections say that probably will fall a little bit short, but he does have the pop to make up for it. He could be a nice 20 home run catcher who hits maybe 230, 240. Not a horrible trade-off, but still not ideal in terms of offensive production. And given that he's just an average defender, just kind of how things are, he's never going to be like a Will Smith in the 4-hole of a lineup. He could be 6th, 7th, 8th, and kind of give you some nice power at the back end of your lineup, but he certainly won't be someone you're going to count on in the 4-hole unless the Tigers really have just a really bad team and want to get him experience near the top of the lineup. The other player heading to Detroit in this deal actually came over to the Dodgers because of Shohei Ohtani, and that's Trey Sweeney. After the signing of Ohtani, the Dodgers had a logjam in the 40-man roster and traded infield prospect Corbett Vivas, who was on the 40-man roster for Trey Sweeney, who, as a Yankees 2021 first-round pick, was not needed on the 40-man roster yet and has subsequently been traded to the Dodgers. And now that he's eligible and ahead of the 2025 season, he's been traded once again to the Tigers, that the Tigers now have the ability to add him to their 40-man roster and protect him from the Rule 5 draft. Despite the need for some adjustments to his swing, a lot of people thought that Sweeney could be a very quick riser through the minor leagues and make his major league debut sooner rather than later. The 2021 Ohio Valley Conference Player of the Year had what a lot of scouts thought a very developed and mature hit tool that could play almost immediately at the levels of the upper minors, but unfortunately it hasn't really progressed the way a lot of people have wanted. And although he is only 24 right now, which is a little old for a prospect, not old in general, but older for a prospect, he hasn't really put it all together yet, which is unfortunate. And in a very hitter-friendly Pacific Coast League where he plays, he only has a 761 OPS, which is below league average. And it's just not a great tool for him right now. It's very disappointing that a former first-rounder hasn't panned out the way he should, but he does have the potential to stick at shortstop, which is a nice plus to him. And part of the reason why he's been ranked highly in the first place is because he can stick at shortstop long-term defensively. Not a plus defender there, but he can, and that has a lot of value. If not, it's more than fine for him to slide over to third. He has the arm strength to do it. And a lefty in the batter's box always has some value for a team. He's not going to be a super great shortstop, but if you're starting Ryan Kleider right now at shortstop and you already have Javi Baez, who probably isn't the guy who you really thought he was when you signed him, a little unfortunate, but you have the ability to have someone else play. You can maybe DH him. You can move him to third base if Gio Urshela does not come back on a free agent deal this offseason. A little bit of flexibility if he does make the major leagues this year as well. There's definitely some value in having him, but that value is certainly not what it was when he was selected 20th overall in that 2021 MLB draft. It's unfortunate that a first rounder hasn't panned out as well, but it happens every draft, and unfortunately for Sweeney, it doesn't seem like he has as high as a ceiling as people had once hoped. Now that we've gone ahead and talked about all the players in this deal, let's go ahead and give each team some fun trade grades. For the Detroit Tigers, I'm going to have to unfortunately give this a B-. I think given that everything else that has gone on today, this is a relatively weak return. This has been a huge seller's market. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And a lot of people really expected to get a big return for Jack Flaherty, especially after the likes of Tanner Scott got a ton back. This is a somewhat questionable decision. It's something that I don't think a lot of people really wanted to get back. I think people are expecting a lot better return, but that is to say that Thayron Liranzo is someone who was a borderline top 100 prospect. That is honestly, by Baseball America standards, the best prospect traded this deadline. But there's also a lack of depth in the return, and when you look at a lot of the other deals, there's just been a lot more given back to some of these teams that I think has a little bit more value, and they could have gotten a little bit more out of a rental, especially after like the Tanner Scott deal to the Padres. That was a huge return. And I just don't think they got the same thing for someone who has been arguably the same level as Tanner Scott, but just as a starter in 2024. And then for the Dodgers, I'll give this a B+. They desperately needed another veteran in that bullpen. They've struggled a lot with injuries this year and have a very young team. And although they do have a ton of depth in that starting rotation that's very young and controllable, and they probably could have dealt from that if they really wanted to, they didn't give up a ton for Jack Flaherty. Yes, they gave up a borderline top 100 prospect, which is very steep. But given the seller's market, I think they made out pretty well. They addressed a need. They got the best pitcher who was traded at the deadline, since a lot of the ones that we thought, like Garrett Crochet and Tariq Skubal, who granted probably never were, but there were at least enough smoke around it that it made it seem like it was possible, didn't end up getting traded. So they got the best starting pitcher on the market. And so far, that's a good trade. They traded away someone who they really didn't need because they have a catcher locked up for the future in Will Smith, and they also have a first baseman locked up for the future in Freddie Freeman. So you'd have to DH him, and at that point, he's blocked. Thayron Liranzo didn't have a real spot at the major league level, and although he is a couple years away, Still, at this point, you don't need to have him on your roster because at this point, he's just taking up space. And then Trey Sweeney was just a piece to clear up 40-man roster space, just a way to kind of get someone who had a high upside. The fact you're able to get something out of him is huge because I don't think he's going to make a huge impact at the major league level. He could be a decent player who plays for a couple seasons, maybe a 7-8 year vet who just plays 100 games a year, but I just don't think he has as high as a ceiling as a lot of people had hoped when he got drafted. And for the Dodgers to go ahead, clear off 40-man roster space to get Shohei Ohtani and then trade him away for value, a big value at that, that's a huge plus. The Dodgers are also known for their pitching development and going ahead and refining what pitchers need to go ahead and be better. And so if you take a very good Jack Flaherty and give him to the Dodgers, that's something to be very scared of. I've debated giving this an A-, but I think a B+ is a fairer grade. And I'm very excited to see what Jack Flaherty can do in Los Angeles. It'll be interesting to see how all these trades have now officially played out now that the deadline is officially over. Might be a couple trades rolling in. They're not always announced at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll see, but it's been a very wild ride. And it seems like both teams are happy with what they got, so we'll see exactly how they end up. Thank you again for watching to the end, and hopefully you've watched all the trade videos I've put out this trade deadline. If not, just definitely go ahead and make sure to watch those. Subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you thought of this trade in the comments below. Thank you again for having a wild trade deadline with me. I'll probably pump out a couple more videos just about the trades that have happened for all of the interested fans, and hopefully your team did exactly what they needed to do this deadline. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the very next video.